I'm Aaron from PhoneDog.com, and it's time to get ready for another epic Android dogfight. This time, we're back on Verizon. One of them is a Samsung Galaxy S3. It's an iconic device from Samsung. It's their flagship for 2012, at least for the first half, and it's packing a dual-core processor, an 8-megapixel camera, a 4.8-inch HD display, and more. And it's available at Verizon. The other one is also available at Verizon, the HTC DROID Incredible 4G LTE. Now, it's not the 1X, it's not the Evo 4G LTE, but at least Verizon finally got one of the new HTC devices in 2012. It's available now at Verizon. It's packing a 1.2 gigahertz dual-core processor, an 8-megapixel camera, and a little smaller 4-inch display. Which one is the hot Android phone? We're going to find out in the dogfight, but first, some love to Best Buy Mobile for hooking us up with phones like the Galaxy S3 and like the DROID Incredible 4G LTE, both actually of which are coming to the game very soon, thanks to Best Buy Mobile. When you go into Best Buy Mobile, you'll walk out working. They'll help you set up your email, your web, your contacts, your settings. So when you walk out the door with either of these devices, whether you go with the big device or the smaller device, you'll walk out the door working thanks to Best Buy Mobile. Let's take a look. SGS3, DROID Incredible 4G LTE. Which one is the must-have Android smartphone of at least August 2012? We'll find out starting right now. Hey, you know what? I know, another day, another dogfight, but hey, there are a ton of devices out there on the market that are worthy of comparison, and two of those are right here. One of them is the Samsung Galaxy S3. Now, we've done tons of dogfights. We've done reviews on the international and the US version. Check those out at PhoneDog.com or at YouTube.com/PhoneDog on the YouTube channel side of things. But it's an iconic device from Samsung. It's at least their flagship device for the first half of the year. The rumor right now is that the Galaxy Note 2 is going to come out, so that may take some of the crown, if you will, from the Galaxy S3, but still an iconic device with, at least in the US, and this is a US version, this is the Verizon version to be exact, a 1.5 gigahertz dual-core Snapdragon S4 CPU. It's also got a 4.8-inch Super AMOLED HD display with Pentile technology, an 8-megapixel camera on the back with 1080p HD video recording. You got your LTE logo here, as you can see. This is the white one. It comes in 16 and 32 gigabyte variants on Verizon in the white and the blue color. And then, of course, the Galaxy S3 logo down here at the bottom also. A 2,100 milliamp hour battery is in the back of this device with NFC capabilities, S-Beam, lots of cool features there that we'll talk more about in part 2. A front-facing camera, 4G LTE connectivity, and Android 4.0, also known as Ice Cream Sandwich, with Samsung's TouchWiz user interface. Now, this is the new version of TouchWiz, so if you're looking at this and you're like, this doesn't look like my Galaxy S2, well, it's because it's a very different version of TouchWiz in comparison to what you're used to for, say, or for example, rather, on the Samsung Galaxy Note. You can kind of see the difference here just between the dock on this and then the dock down here. A ton of other differences, great software stuff, which we'll talk about in just a second. Then you have the HTC DROID Incredible 4G LTE over here on Verizon. It's available for a little bit less money, and it's packing a 1.2 gigahertz dual-core Snapdragon S4 CPU. So same family of processor, clock speed's a little bit lower, a 4-inch QHD display. You've got an 8-megapixel camera on the back. You've got a front-facing camera. You've got a 1,700 milliamp hour battery. You've got Android 4.0 with HTC since version 4, and also 4G LTE connectivity over here is a little bit smaller. Take a look at how it fits inside of the Samsung Galaxy S3. So, you know, depending on your size, your personal preferences when it comes to devices, for the longest time I argued that 4 inches was a sweet spot for a lot of people. I think it's since moved up to 4.3 inches or 4.5. I think that's kind of the median size right now for a lot of people, because even people with smaller hands, people like my mother, people, you know, that aren't typically huge smartphone users, are even saying, I want 4.3 inches, I want 4.5 inches. So just something to keep in mind. And even at 4.8, this is surprisingly easy to hold in the hand. So to jump into it, both have Android 4.0, both are a little bit different in terms of the user interface. Because they're both running Android 4.0, you'd think, well, maybe they're kind of similar. They're really not. Because of the user interfaces, these are really, you know, it's almost like you're getting, you know, a Samsung experience or an HTC experience, more so than you're really getting an Android experience here. And this is where the Android ecosystem's kind of gone over the years. It's less like, hey, this is Android, hey, this is Android. It's more like, hey, this is TouchWiz, hey, this is Sense. And that seems to be kind of, you know, you decide between Sense devices or TouchWiz devices as opposed to other Android devices. But out of the gate, you'll see some Verizon stuff pre-installed on both of these devices. Over here, you get an Amazon Kindle, guided tours, you get Google Plus integration, of course, mobile hotspot, My Verizon Mobile, and then you get VZ Navigator voicemail, which is $2.99 per month for visual voicemail, the VPN client application, and that's about it from Verizon. Over here, you get quite a bit. Vcast apps, you get Google Plus integration, you get I missed one. Let's Golf 3. You've got My Verizon Mobile, NFL Mobile, Real Racing 2, Slingbox, Verizon Video, VZ Navigator, Visual Voicemail again for $2.99 per month. And then, of course, you can scroll over here to Verizon apps and see all the stuff that's pre-installed. So there's a lot of bloatware pre-installed on both, but particularly on the HTC DROID Incredible 4G LTE. And unfortunately, you can't uninstall this stuff. You can kind of disable some of it, but you can't really uninstall it. Now, Sense 4, very different from TouchWiz. You can see between frequent and downloads here. And I have to admit, I was kind of bummed that Verizon didn't get, I wasn't kind of bummed, I was very bummed that Verizon didn't get the HTC One X or the Evo 4G LTE or some sort of lookalike device for Verizon. This is more like the One S. It's actually a step down from the One S in the processor department, and then in the screen, or in the imaging department rather, because it doesn't have image sense technology. So if you love those features on your One X, like burst mode or any of that stuff you've gotten used to on the camera, you don't get that over here. You get the same great camera, but unfortunately it doesn't have the cool features that or even the Galaxy S3 has, but especially the HTC flagship devices. So I would have loved to have seen even a One S or like a One X on Verizon, despite the fact that personally I'm not a fan of the One X's design. I prefer the Evo 4G LTE. So that's my personal preference. I would love to have seen that on Verizon. Unfortunately, we didn't, though. Another thing that's really annoying me about, let me get rid of some of these notifications here, that's really frustrating me about Verizon's latest Android phones, these ongoing Wi-Fi notifications. Now take a look at the Incredible 4G LTE. Regardless of whether I want Wi-Fi on or off, that annoying little Wi-Fi notification stays up there in the left-hand corner. Now, over here, it's not as intrusive, but you do get it in the menu and it stays there. So with Wi-Fi off or Wi-Fi on, it stays in the ongoing notifications area. You can't get rid of it, despite how much you may want to. And then, of course, your notifications are down here. So after coming from like an AT&T Galaxy S3 or T-Mobile Galaxy S3, I was struggling because I was clicking this by default, and I was like, wait a second, these aren't my notifications. And another very frustrating thing is, for example, I used this for a couple of weeks on Verizon when I was testing it. I connect to my work Wi-Fi here in the office, and even when I would disconnect from the Wi-Fi, it would still remember it, and anytime I came into it, it would remember it and say, hey, we know you're at work, do you want to connect? And I'm like, no, I don't want to connect. I don't want you, don't make me tell you, or I should be the one to be able to tell you when I want to connect, not the other way around. And so you have to manually forget every network as you go along, or else if you come back into it, you're going to deal with that same issue. So little things like that, little pesky things that Verizon's done to change these devices around, that's very, very frustrating. I'm like, you should have just kept it the way Samsung had it, the way HTC had it on some of the other carriers. But out of the gate, very different experience over here. 7 home screens on both, and you can easily access those by pinching out. And you've got a bunch of different widgets. You've got 7 home screens, as you can see through here. And then your notification bars, as I showed, a little bit different up here with Samsung having some shortcuts, but you do have shortcuts to settings on both of these devices where you can access wireless and networks. Device, also known as personal over here. Phone, also known as personal over here. And then, of course, system down here at the bottom. I do like this little effect that it's got going on down here, this little accordion effect. HTC's done a great job with Sense 4. It's much less intrusive than Sense 3 or Sense 3.5 or 3.6. They've gotten rid of some of the obnoxious transition effects and things like that to make it a really clean user interface. Samsung over here, and go to the full review if you want more on particular devices, if you want more on the Incredible 4G LTE or the Galaxy S3, but I do want to point out some of the software features really quickly on this device, because I think in a world of Android 4.0, software is really where these manufacturers are going to be able to distinguish themselves. And a couple of things over here: motion activation, love direct call. I just want to go through some of these with you. Direct call is where if you're in a text message, let's say I'm text messaging John Doe, I'm like, oh, I need to call John Doe. All I have to do is hold the phone up to my ear from the text message prompt, and I can call. Smart Alert is very cool because you don't have to rely on the notification light. If you have a missed call or a missed text, all you have to do is pick the phone up. It vibrates once, and that saves you from having to turn the screen on and off, thus destroying battery life in the process. Tap to top is very cool. Double tap, it takes you to the top of a list. The other ones I don't use a whole lot, but the palm swipe one is great for when you're doing screenshots, as you can see there. And it'll save the screenshot like that. Very easy. I use that countless times throughout the day for screenshots. And then down through here, security. And let's take a look at some of the lock screen options as well. Now, where HTC wins, which we'll talk about in just a second, is personalization, and I'll go through that. But here you can see camera quick access, information ticker. I've got the shortcuts, dual clock. I can turn on weather, for example, and I can do wake up commands. So where I say like Galaxy start music, I can set it for a function like open camera, and I can say something and say like boogie 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 or great googly moogly, and that'll open the camera. It doesn't have to be like Galaxy open camera. I can set it to whatever I want to, or I like tacos for breakfast, and that'll open up the camera from there. And then of course here is the lock screen to show you what we did with the weather, and then the clock, and then the shortcuts down here at the bottom, and then I press and hold to activate the camera And it's that easy. Now over here, great personalization on the HTC side where they really win. You can change stuff like the skin, which you can't do on the Galaxy S3. Now, where Verizon kind of makes this an issue is you can't go to HTC Hub and download new skins like you can on the One X and the Evo 4G LTE. They kind of locked it down. You're stuck with the 4 skins that come pre-installed. And, while that's quite you got a few options here. HTC, for example, I can apply, and you'll notice the buttons down here will change from the aluminum look to more of a stock HTC look. You'll notice the bar up here kind of changed as well in color, and then you can see that it's back to the normal HTC look. So you can change that stuff around. Same with wallpaper, but HTC Hub has always been a great resource for wallpapers, ringtones, and more. And unfortunately, you can't access those through the Verizon devices. So wallpaper there, lock screen style. I can turn on weather. I can do friend updates. I can do clocks. I can do stocks and more. I happen to like the productivity one. I think it's pretty useful. But then again, the weather one is a very popular one. Also, as you can see right here, the ring to unlock, and then I can do shortcuts if I wanted to down here at the bottom and access those much like I can on the unlock screen on the Galaxy S3. So very customizable on both. Samsung has done a great job with the software. That's one of my favorite things about this device because like I said, I think with Android 4.0 they all kind of feel the same despite having very different user interfaces. It's software where you can get ahead. So we're going to jump back into messages so we can take a look at these. Compose, and I'll show you the keyboards. 4.8-inch display over here means it's going to be incredibly easy to type on for people, especially people that are coming from physical QWERTY keyboards. They're kind of new to the whole touchscreen smartphone experience. They may be a little bit apprehensive. It's going to be a great keyboard. Over here, 4-inch display, people coming up from the iPhone maybe that want a 4G LTE device, and they're like, well, forget this Apple company because they're taking forever to get 4G LTE. This may be a good device for them because the screen size is a little bit bigger, but you're not jumping from like 3.5 to 4.8. That may be too much for some people. But otherwise, HTC's keyboard has been updated, as has Samsung's. And as much as I don't care for Samsung's keyboard, I will say it's gotten better here with a built-in swipe feature, if that's your thing, as you can see here. And then you can go back to using it as a normal keyboard as well. So again, not my favorite keyboard. There are alternatives on the Google Play Store, but take a look at this one because they have made some changes to it. And of course, in landscape mode, you'll have no problem. It's a nice big display there. Over here, 4-inch display, and I will say it's better than previous builds of HTC's keyboard. Still a little bit small for me. I have bigger thumbs, so the 4 inches is a little bit too small for me in the way they space the keys together on this. Because a common complaint I hear when people read or watch these videos, they're like, didn't you use the iPhone for 4 or 5 months? Yes, I did, but the keys were a little bit separated, or separated differently, and I will always swear by the prediction or the autocorrection on the iPhone. There are a lot of things the iPhone doesn't do well, but autocorrection is one of them. Has a great life. Quick Brown Fox has a great life, and then portrait to landscape transitions, nice and fast as well. And you'll notice the menu button up here at the top in messages, and then it stays up here at the top with compose and search. And I love the fact that they've actually added little text boxes where you can see what you're doing. And same thing up here, arrow back, and then I can scroll back and I've got my menu button, my back button, and then a physical home button, whereas here I have menu, home, and recent applications, all capacitive buttons.